All right, welcome to our discussion about stem cells. In class, we left off with 2.1.8 that asks us to explain that multicellular organisms differentiate to carry out specialized functions. And remember, we discussed the fact that unicellular organisms perform all of the functions of life, therefore no differentiation is necessary because it is just one cell. But multicellular organisms are going to need to differentiate to form the different organs and tissues that perform the functions of life. One thing that we didn't get to was the end of the 2.1.8 assessment statement, which says that yes, cells differentiate, but they have a complete genome. So they differentiate by expressing some of their genes, but not others. And so one thing to keep in mind is that every cell, whether it's specialized as a heart cell, a muscle cell, a brain cell, contains all of the genetic information. So it contains a complete set of DNA for the organism. The only difference is that it's expressing some of that DNA and not the rest. And so by expressing that DNA, it becomes a highly specialized cell, both in form and function. Here are some images of specialized cells. As you can see, all of them except for the paramecium come from a multicellular organism. So presumably they all have very similar, or if they came from the same organism, the same DNA in the nucleus. But as you can see, their form has changed dramatically, and that in turn influences their function. Now moving on to 2.1.9, it asks us to state that stem cells retain the capacity to divide and the ability to differentiate. So stem cells are found in all multicellular organisms. They are able to divide by mitosis, and they can differentiate into any cell type that's present in that organism. Embryonic stem cells are found within the developing embryo of an organism, and those cells have the most flexibility, which we'll discuss in just a moment. And then adult stem cells are located in various tissues throughout an adult system. And when I say adult, I mean basically from a fetus on. So once the embryo has developed into a fetus, then the stem cells have much less flexibility than when that embryo is first developing. So let's discuss the flexibility a little bit. The reason that cells differentiate is so that multicellular organisms can increase their efficiency. So within my body, not every one of my cells is bringing in oxygen from the outside and exhaling carbon dioxide. Not every one of my cells is beating as a heart cell would beat. So specialization has to occur in order to allow the organism to live as a whole, because now every system is dependent on the function of another system. So my heart is not going to function without the use of my lungs. My brain is not going to function without the use of my kidneys getting toxins out of my body, etc. So when we discuss flexibility, there are 3 levels of flexibility. The first 2, totipotent and pluripotent, are used to describe embryonic stem cells. And so in this case, totipotent stem cells are when the egg and sperm very first fuse, and these cells can become anything having to do with the developing human or the cells needed to support the developing human. So these cells could become, cells of the heart, the brain, etc., or could become cells of the placenta, the amniotic fluid, the amniotic sac, etc. So these cells are both creating the human body and creating the cells necessary to support it. Pluripotent cells are also found within the embryo, and these cells are flexible enough to become any cell within the body still, so spinal cord cells, bone cells, etc., but are no longer flexible enough to become cells to support the developing embryo. And then the last category is multipotent. Multipotent stem cells are cells found within adults, and like I said, that's basically from the developing fetus on, so the systems have formed and now the systems are growing up. And so these cells have some flexibility, but much less. So depending on what system these cells are found within, that will dictate what they can become. For example, human adults have bone marrow in their bones, and these are a type of stem cell. They can become cells of the bone. They can also develop into any type of blood cell. And so from the bone marrow, we can develop red blood cells, white blood cells, etc. But a bone marrow stem cell could not go on to become a muscle cell. So you see it has some flexibility, but not unlimited. Our final assessment statement for this topic, 2.1.10, asks us to outline one therapeutic use of stem cells. And so I'm going to give you a couple of resources to find some therapeutic uses of stem cells, and then below you'll also see some discussion topics for us. So please read The Power to Divide by Rick Weiss. It's a National Geographic article. It is a little bit older, and so because of that, it does a good job of outlining the controversy that's been present in the past, and we'll discuss what's present in the future with the use of stem cells. And I'd also like you to bring in a stem cell current event dealing with any topic about stem cells, their use, legislation, controversy, etc. And then we'll discuss the following topics. I do want to give you a couple examples of therapeutic stem cell use now. And this photo is a little bit grainy, but this is a naked mouse. It is a genetically modified mouse to grow without any hair, and they have been used for quite a long time to regrow the external portion of an ear. And so a person's cells can be basically grafted onto the back of this mouse, and the cells are differentiated into ear cells, and so they're programmed to form the shape of an external portion of an ear. And so if you have an ear injury or an ear cut off for some reason, it is possible to regrow that ear. The ear is then surgically removed from the back of the mouse and then surgically put back onto the human that it belongs to. Another use of stem cells is to actually grow internal organs. And so here you see the use of stem cells to grow a bladder. And there has been some success with growing organs. They are grown in a petri dish, so stem cells are expressing their form to become a bladder, and so they grow into a bladder. And bladders have been one of the more common items to be grown because they don't require a lot of vascularization, and they're fairly simple structures. So maybe someday a heart or a lung could be regrown. At this point, that has not been successful, but they have grown bladders and actually transplanted those into people that need them. Another use of stem cells is actually using adult stem cells, those multipotent type. So here you see that umbilical cord blood stem cells could become cells for bone cartilage, blood vessels, blood cells, nerve cells. They couldn't become nerve cells or muscle cells, but they, unless it's for that specialized area. But they are able to use cord blood stem cells as transplants. If someone needs a new blood system, for example, if someone has leukemia, they're able to remove their own blood supply and then put in these cord blood cells to create a new healthy blood supply. And then lastly, one of the greatest hopes of stem cell use is that they would be able to treat spinal cord injuries. There's been some experimentation on mice with a small amount of success putting stem cells over spinal cord injuries and them then differentiating into spinal cord cells in order to repair that spinal cord. So that's one hope. There's so much potential for this, and I'm excited to discuss it with you in class, so please be sure to read that article and find a current event and be ready to discuss the uses, the controversy, what different countries are doing with this topic, etc.